On the broadcast tonight, the South Korean military says the evidence suggests that the drones discovered in the south in recent weeks were built and sent by North Korea on espionage missions. A clear violation of UN resolutions is the conclusion made by the UN Sanctions Committee on North Korea. Countermeasures to deal with the threat will be drawn up in the next month. And Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott is confident that the latest signal captured by a listening device buoy indicates that the search for Flight 370 is focused on the correct area. Early edition begins now.
당신의 유럽은 어디였나요?
Excellence in flight. Korean Air.
It is 5 a.m. in New York, 1 p.m. in Moscow, and 6 on a Friday evening here in Seoul. Welcome to Early Edition at 6. I'm Moon Gon-young.
And I'm Daniel Che. Thank you for joining us.
Now, a team of South Korean investigators strongly believes the 3 drones recently found crashed in different parts of the south came from North Korea.
And to confirm and reinforce their findings, they now turn to a team of GPS experts. Our Choi Yu-sun starts us off.
The investigative team has found a sizable amount of circumstantial evidence from the aerial vehicle's characteristics and loaded equipment that confirms the drones were sent by North Korea.
On Friday, the South Korean government revealed what it knows so far about the 3 unmanned aerial vehicles found crashed in Paju, north of Seoul, on the western island of Baekneung-do, and in Samcheok, Gangwon-do province. The Defense Ministry said identification information on the parts used inside the drone's engines, data transmitter receivers, and computer chips appear to have been intentionally damaged, another factor that points the finger at Pyongyang. And some of the drones carried a low-power analog video transmitter thought to have been incapable of sending photos or video back to the north. The other evidence that implicates the north are the color and shape of the fuselages. They were very similar to the ones seen during North Korean founder Kim Il-sung's birthday parade 2 years ago. Investigators, however, failed to decode the GPS coordinates for the drone's point of return as they were concerned about damaging the information stored inside the central processing unit. A separate team of civilian experts from the South and the United States will probe the GPS system.
The scientific investigative team will mobilize all efforts to find further evidence. This includes determining the drone's point of takeoff by analyzing the photos, the data stored in the central processing unit, as well as their travel routes.
If the final results confirm the drones to be from North Korea, Seoul says it will consider it a violation of the armistice agreement and take strong measures at the international level. Choi Yu-sun, Arirang News.
And now on to the international community's efforts to counter the ongoing threat posed by North Korea.
The UN Sanctions Committee has been mulling over ways to punish Pyongyang for its recent ballistic missile launches that destabilized the region.
Now, this as the defense chiefs of South Korea and the United States picked up the phone to coordinate their North Korea policies. Here's our Shin Se-min with the details.
A clear violation of UN resolutions. That was the conclusion that the UN's North Korea Sanctions Committee came to during an emergency meeting on Thursday local time. The meeting was a first since Pyongyang launched 2 mid-range ballistic missiles late last month, and UN sources say the panel agreed to come up with countermeasures to deal with the threat. As for when, the sources say the committee will wait until May to hold further talks after a report from a North Korean specialist is finalized. To no one's surprise, South Korea, the US, Britain, and France supported the statement, while China and Russia were more cautious, saying the wider issue of securing peace and stability on the Korean peninsula was a most pressing concern. A day before the committee meeting, South Korean Defense Minister Kim Kwan-jin received a phone call from his U.S. counterpart Chuck Hagel, with both agreeing to work hand-in-hand to counter threats posed by Pyongyang. During their 20-minute phone conversation, the two agreed that Pyongyang's missile and nuclear weapons pose a grave challenge to the Korean peninsula and international community. Hagel also informed Kim of Washington's plan to dispatch 2 additional Aegis-equipped destroyers to Japan by 2017 to counter the North Korea threat. Also on Thursday, a former U.S. non-proliferation official said the international community should step up its efforts for targeted sanctions on the North Korean leadership. Speaking at a forum hosted by the 38 North website, Joseph De Thomas said it was important to find mechanisms that go after the North Korean regime and not its people. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, Pyongyang has warned Washington of strong countermeasures if it maintains its so-called hostile North Korea policies, which some see as a threat of a 4th nuclear test.
North Korea's National Defense Commission said Friday that while the United States, along with the international community, has been critical of Pyongyang's rocket launches, it has not raised issue with South Korea's ballistic missile launches last month. The communist state called this part of Washington's two-sided nature and added it must withdraw all sanctions on Pyongyang. Experts say the strong countermeasures Pyongyang is referring to could be additional missile launches or a 4th nuclear test.
Now, there's a fresh wave of optimism that the key members of the 6-way talks on North Korea's denuclearization will make some compromises and agree to resume dialogue in the near future.
Our Hwang Sung-hee reports on the back-to-back meetings between these key players.
Diplomatic activity is picking up speed to try and jumpstart the long-stalled 6-party nuclear talks. South Korean Chief Nuclear Envoy Hwang Jung-guk is in Beijing Friday for talks with his Chinese counterpart Woo Da-wei, following a trilateral meeting with the United States and Japan in Washington earlier this week.
South Korea and China will discuss issues related to North Korea's nuclear program, including ways to resume the denuclearization talks.
The Chinese envoy will reportedly travel to Washington soon for talks with the U.S. Chief Nuclear Envoy Glenn Davies. Woo is expected to debrief South Korea and the U.S. on the results of his visit to Pyongyang last month and step up efforts to bring back North Korea to the 6-party talks. The multilateral denuclearization dialogue involving the 2 Koreas, the U.S., China, Japan, and Russia, has been stalled since late 2008. But anticipation about a possible resumption is growing. Following their 3-way meeting, Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo said they will consider more flexibility in bringing Pyongyang back to the negotiating table. The 3 parties have been demanding North Korea's denuclearization as a precondition to restarting the Aid for Disarmament talks. South Korea's Unification Ministry said the North may also be ready to talk things out. In its analysis of North Korea's recent Spring People's Assembly session, the ministry noted the leadership appears to have set its power structure and pointed to the possibility of the regime pursuing the resumption of the talks more aggressively down the road. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
Well, for a more in-depth look into the situation on the Korean Peninsula and Northeast Asia in relation with North Korea, we have a special guest in the studio this evening.
Dr. Dean Chang, Senior Research Fellow at the Washington-based Heritage Foundation. Welcome to Korea, of course, and thank you so much for making time during your short visit to Korea to join us here today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
All right, Dean, let's talk about North Korea. So the latest ballistic missile launches by North Korea, firing artillery over the Northern Lemon Line, and of course, flying spy drones to South Korea. What are North Korea's intentions of late? I mean, what is the message Kim Jong-un is trying to send to the rest of the world?
Well, I think there are several messages that are being sent. The first one is, I am still relevant. I think that one of the things you notice is that when Kim Jong-un is out of the news for a while, all of a sudden you start having provocations. The other aspect here is a reminder along the same lines that not only will he not be ignored, but that he remains a factor, and therefore, ideally, South Korea and the United States will make concessions to him, but even if not, to remind us all of the price of ignoring him.
Well, clearly he enjoys his celebrity, and he could be a very dangerous person in that respect. So, to what extent could North Korea carry out these provocations, judging by Kim's character, the need for appreciation and recognition from the rest of the world? He might push it towards a bigger conflict between the two Koreas. Is that possible?
Unfortunately, the answer there is yes. When you consider that, for example, these drones are a violation of South Korean airspace. South Korea is now purchasing low-level radars and things to try and track these systems. But the implication here is that North Korea is willing to do things that, with any other country, particularly given the state of the militarized nature of the DMZ, et cetera, is very, very high risk. And these are the sorts of actions that, if taken down the wrong path, given President Park's commitment to strike back harder, you're looking at a real possibility here of miscalculation, particularly by the North, that could in fact lead to a small conflict initially, but could then escalate and expand.
Right, moving on to a bigger, I suppose, a bigger provocation or threat by North Korea. South Korea and its allies have been warning Pyongyang that if it were to go ahead with a fourth nuclear test, that it would come with an unimaginable cost. Now, how likely is North Korea to carry out another test?
I think that North Korea's nuclear tests should be seen in two different lenses. One is as a provocation, but the other is also proof of concept. In other words, are their systems actually reliable? Will they go off if ordered? So here you have two possibilities for these tests. The second one is something that's almost unavoidable in order for the scientists to prove that their weapons do work. So I would say that the chances are pretty good that we will see a North Korean test, even if it's not intended as a provocation. This is part of the problem here, is that North Korea is so closed, we don't really have good insight into the motivations for specific events.
Well, should the long overdue six-party denuclearization talks do resume, what is the realistic expectations? Can we expect even a glimmer of hope that North Korea could eventually, for some strange reason, be forced to give up its nuclear ambitions?
I'm afraid I'm a real pessimist when it comes to the six-party talks. The nuclear weapons program is so tied to the Kim family's survival that I don't see any realistic
It's like a member of their family that they won't give up.
It is the ugly stepchild member of the family that insists on having a spot, however, at the dinner table.
And it's closely, I suppose, North Korea views it as being linked to its regime's survival. So I suppose it'd be harder for North Korea to give up its nuclear arms. And your view is that the six-party talks would not be able to give fruit to the disarmament of nuclear arms by North Korea.
Exactly. There is simply not enough in the way of benefits that could possibly be derived by North Korea to justify, from their perspective, giving up the nuclear card. There is no amount of aid, there's no amount of respect that could be given realistically that would make the Kim family say, we will give up this ultimate trump card.
Now, moving on to China, of course, it is a very big player in this region. Now, should there be a regime collapse or whatnot in North Korea, do you think China will get involved? I mean, what is China's stance on a possible reunification on the Korean Peninsula? And if there were a collapse in North Korea, of course, South Korea would have to do the reunification.
This is an issue that is of grave concern in Washington. We and our South Korean allies have repeatedly approached China to try and engage them in a conversation on exactly this issue. If there is a collapse, what will you do about it? And China, frankly, has rebuffed us, rejected any conversation. They are not interested in sharing with us any kind of contingency planning. This is remarkably destabilizing because it leaves us operating in the dark with the real possibility, in the event of a collapse, of perhaps even a clash between our forces, allied forces together, and Chinese forces.
Well, China, another mysterious country, second only to North Korea, I'm assuming, but hopefully we will reach a point where we can all agree on certain things and we can work out our differences sometime in our lifetime, hopefully. Well, Dean Cheng, thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed what's left of your stay here in Korea.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.
We're all destroyed.
Digging deeper, getting to the bottom of stories that impact your life. Talking with you on air and online. Connecting you with experts on the world's most pressing issues. News and current affairs at its best with Moon Gon-young and Daniel Che on Early Edition at 6.
It's vitally important to trust the place in which you keep your hard-earned cash, but here in Korea these days, trusting banks, credit card firms, and other financial institutions is in very short supply.
Somehow the leaks happen to happen in threes. In just the latest wave of leaks, the personal information of tens of thousands of customers has been stolen from, again, 3 local credit card companies this time. Our Hwang Ji-hye has the details.
Yet another huge credit card company in Korea has failed to protect its clients' personal information. Financial sources said Friday that the data of some 35,000 Shinhan card customers has been leaked. The information includes credit card numbers and passwords for the company's loyalty cards. Since many clients use the same passwords for their credit and loyalty cards, this data breach has the potential to lead to mass credit card fraud. This latest discovery came as the Financial Supervisory Service looked into a recent case in which a gang hacked into a private server and stole information on credit card transactions. Aside from Shinhan, the personal information of more than 60,000 customers from companies like Kookmin and Nongyap was compromised. That takes the total number of people that had their information used by the ring to around 100,000. Local financial authorities on the same day opened a meeting where they ordered credit card firms to adopt integrated circuit or IC cards by the end of the year. IC cards are considered to be more secure than traditional magnetic stripe cards. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
Well, Samsung's latest smartphone model is out, and the Korean tech giant is hoping the Galaxy S5 can put a little wind in the company's sales, which have hit a dip in recent months. Our Kim Ji-yeon reports.
Samsung Electronics Galaxy S5 debuted in 125 countries on Friday as a bigger, better, and faster version of its predecessor. The S5 features a 13cm screen with a fingerprint reader, 16-megapixel camera, and a battery that lasts 20% longer than the S4. The new phone is covered with a water-resistant coating that can withstand 30 minutes at the bottom of a pool a meter deep. Samsung is hoping the S5 can boost its lagging sales after 2 straight quarters of mediocre profits. Earlier this week, the company released a provisional report saying first quarter sales amounted to $50.2 billion, down nearly 11% from the previous quarter. To increase demand, Samsung has dropped the price of its S5 model with LTE capabilities to $838. That's $30 less than the S4's price tag when it was released last July. Samsung is spreading its focus to wearable devices, including the Gear 2 smartwatch, which uses the company's own Tizen operating system and is also available Friday. Speaking at the International World Wide Web Conference held in Seoul, Samsung Electronics Executive Vice President Choi Jong-duk held his wrist up high, boasting that the Tizen optimizes the benefits of an open-source web-centric platform while minimizing privacy concerns and security breaches. Choi says the company plans to find ways to expand the application of Tizen by opening a conference for the software platform in San Francisco this upcoming June. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Authorities searching for Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 in the Indian Ocean believe they are on the right track. Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott told reporters in China he was very confident that the underwater pings recently detected are from the plane's black box. Abbott did say, though, that the signal is starting to fade and that it's crucial to recover the black box before its battery runs out. That was just about all Abbott said on the issue, adding that he did not want to reveal too much until he had had the opportunity to update the Chinese leadership later in the day.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has stirred up the pot in the Ukraine once again, this time by threatening to cut off gas deliveries to the country. This as NATO says Russia has deployed tens of thousands of troops on the eastern Ukrainian border. Our Connie Kim reports.
The United States was quick to respond to Russian President Vladimir Putin's warning that Moscow may cut its gas supply to Ukraine. It has accused Russia of trying to take control of Ukraine using its natural resources as a leverage point.
We condemn Russia's efforts to use energy as a tool of coercion against Ukraine. Ukraine is now paying $485, a price clearly not set by market forces and well above the average price paid by EU members.
The State Department spokesperson also added that Washington is encouraging Ukraine and its western border allies to prepare to reverse natural gas flows in the pipeline so that Kiev has access to additional gas supplies if needed. Putin's warning came after Kiev missed a deadline to pay its $2.2 billion gas debt. In a letter to 18 European countries, Putin said gas giant Gazprom will be compelled to require that Ukraine make upfront payments, and that if the back payments are not made, the gas tycoon could completely or partially cease gas deliveries as a last resort. Moscow's threat is worrying for European countries as pipelines transiting Kiev carry Russian gas to several European countries, including Germany, the largest Russian gas consumer. Meanwhile, NATO released satellite images of the eastern Ukrainian border in late March and early April. They showed that some 40,000 Russian troops were deployed along with warplanes and helicopters. An official from NATO says this is a capable force that is ready to quickly move into Ukraine with orders. The revelations of the pictures come before top diplomats from the US, Russia, and Europe are set to gather for a ministerial-level meeting for next week. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Back here in Korea, a woman who beat her 8-year-old stepdaughter to death was sentenced this Friday. Despite the brutal and heinous nature of the crime, she'll spend just 10 years behind bars. The case sparked public outcry and has prompted politicians here in the nation to take extreme measures to tackle child abuse. Our Connie Lee reports.
It was in this home in Gyeongsangbuk-do province where an 8-year-old girl was fatally beaten to death by her stepmother. Punched and kicked repeatedly, the girl died from a ruptured intestine last August. Her stepmother, identified only by her surname Im, and her husband went on trial this Friday morning. And despite prosecutors asking for a 20-year jail sentence for the stepmother, she was sentenced to 10 years by the judge on Friday. The father in this case was given a 3-year term for negligence, despite prosecutors asking for 7 years of jail time. Officials say the stepmother not only beat her youngest stepdaughter to death, but also forced her older stepdaughter to testify that she killed her younger sister. Public outrage surrounding the case grew even more when a letter written by the victim's 12-year-old sister claimed the stepmother had put her inside a laundry machine and let it run. Meanwhile, on the heels of Friday's trial, the Ministry of Health and Welfare released data that shows 97 children died from parental abuse from 2001 to 2012. The report, however, also notes that the number of deaths is probably higher, as many cases go unreported. In light of this case and other high-profile child abuse cases in Korea, the government is also taking action, with policymakers and ruling party lawmakers looking for ways to put an end to child abuse. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
That brings us to the end of our newscast for this week. Thank you for watching. For our viewers in Korea, have a wonderful rest of the evening.
And a great start of the day to those of you in other parts of the world.
This has been Daniel Choi.
And I'm Moon Gan-young. We hope to see you right back here same time Monday evening. Bye-bye.